The thing about being branded a failure is that, eventually, it stops stinging. It fades into the background, a low, persistent hum like the buzz of an old refrigerator. Just another part of the ambience at family gatherings. Or so I convinced myself as I stepped onto the front porch of my parents' house for yet another Thanksgiving dinner. I'm Catherine Bennett, though within these walls, I'm just Kathy. Always said with a subtle sigh, a half smile, and a tilt of the head, like even my name is some kind of letdown. The coat I wore, sleek, minimalist, and costing more than their monthly mortgage, was purposefully understated. No need to show my cards. Not yet. Look who finally decided to show up, my sister Diana called from the doorway, her voice already tinged with mockery. The family disappointment makes a grand entrance. I gave a strained smile, my thoughts drifting to the pile of contracts waiting back on my office desk. Diana had no idea how ironic her words were. Today would be different. Everything was about to shift. Inside, the usual cast of characters had already gathered. Uncle Peter, Dad's right hand at Bennett Manufacturing. Aunt Margaret, always eager to list Diana's latest achievements while finding subtle new ways to highlight my so-called missteps. My cousins James and Laura, both clinging to mid-level roles at the family business, convinced they were future CEOs. My mother, Kathy, greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. "Couldn't you have worn something nicer?" she murmured. "It's Thanksgiving, dear." I resisted the urge to laugh. 3 Manhattan boutiques bore my name, stocked with couture most people never see in person. "This was all I had, Mom," I replied mildly. She gave a theatrical sigh. "Well, at least you came. Diana mentioned you're still dabbling in that little online thing. Selling clothes or whatever it is." Before I could answer, Diana floated over, her diamond bracelet catching the light like a spotlight. "Not just clothes, Mom. Kathy resells designer pieces. Like an upscale thrift store, but on the internet." She turned to me, her expression oozing faux concern. "How's that going, by the way? Making rent?" If only she knew. If any of them knew. That Bennett Manufacturing, the family's pride and legacy, was drowning in red ink. That suppliers had started backing away. That bankruptcy paperwork was being reviewed by a judge as we spoke. And that my little online thing was actually Eclipse Luxury Group, one of the biggest names in luxury retail nationwide. But they didn't know. Not yet. "I manage," I said quietly, accepting a glass of wine from my father. "Getting by isn't the Bennett way," he boomed, swelling with pride. "Look at Diana, youngest VP in the company's history. James and Laura, moving up the ranks. That's what success looks like." I sipped my wine to hide the grin tugging at my lips. The Bennett way had run their company straight into the dirt. While they clung to tradition and nepotism, I had built an empire, brick by digital brick. Speaking of success, Diana practically bounced. "Wait until you hear our news. We're expanding. 3 new facilities next year. Dad's even thinking about going public." I nearly choked. Expanding? When they could barely cover payroll. When creditors were circling like vultures. "That's bold," I said. "Not that you'd understand," Uncle Peter cut in. "Real business strategy isn't everyone's strength, Kathy. Some of us just don't have the head for it." The room broke into smug laughter. Ah yes, the running joke. Poor Kathy, who couldn't hack it in the family firm. The one who walked away when they offered her a job in the mailroom, calling it a learning opportunity. Remember when she told us to start selling online? James snorted. Said retail was evolving or something. Or when she wanted us to invest in that luxury goods startup, Laura added. What was it called again? Eclipse something? Eclipse Luxury Group, I said softly. That's it. Diana burst out laughing. God, imagine if we'd taken her seriously. We'd probably be bankrupt by now. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I didn't even need to look. The timing was perfect. Dinner's ready, my mother called from the dining room. Everyone, find your seats. We moved into the formal dining room, name cards already set. Diana sat at Dad's right, of course. I was exiled to the far end, squeezed between Laura and Aunt Margaret. So, Kathy, Aunt Margaret began as we passed the turkey, have you thought about getting a real job? I hear Walmart's hiring. More laughter. I calmly cut into my turkey, recalling the day 5 years ago when they offered me the mailroom. At the time, I'd been working in acquisitions, fresh off my MBA, offering them data-backed strategies to modernize. But Uncle Peter had convinced my father I wasn't ready. The mailroom will teach her humility, he'd said. I walked. Sold my shares for pennies on the dollar. Shares that would be worth nothing by morning. I took that cash and invested in a niche luxury platform that no one else had seen potential in. Eclipse. Today, it spanned 30 boutiques, half a dozen e-commerce sites, and was on the verge of acquiring its first manufacturing firm. Actually, I said, setting my fork down, there's something I wanted to talk to you all about. Business related. My mother gave a weary sigh. Oh, sweetheart. Not tonight. Yes, let's not revisit her career advice, Diana said with a smirk. Didn't that Eclipse company you loved so much get bought out? It did, I nodded. By Morgan Holdings. Diana turned to Dad. Thank God we didn't follow her advice. Total disaster. My phone buzzed again. This time, I took it out and glanced at the screen with deliberate calm. Everything okay? My father asked, clearly irritated. Another crisis at your little side hustle? No, I replied, slipping the phone back into my coat. Just confirmation. The court accepted Bennett Manufacturing's bankruptcy filing. The room fell silent. Diana's fork clinked against her plate. What did you just say? My father's tone turned cold. Kathy. Explain. I took a bite of turkey, chewed slowly, and then looked up. Your bankruptcy filing. Chapter 11. Just got approved. Though with your debt load, I'd expect it to flip to Chapter 7 fairly quickly. That's not possible, Uncle Peter said, voice shaking. How would you even know? Oh, I said, casually. Did I forget to mention? Morgan Holdings, the firm that bought Eclipse? I smiled, letting the moment breathe. That's my holding company. I own every piece of it, I said simply, including all of Bennett Manufacturing's outstanding liabilities. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Just moments ago, laughter had bounced off the walls. Now, you could practically hear the chandelier humming above us. My father looked like someone had drained the color from his face. Diana sat frozen, her jaw slack, the bright red of her lipstick now jarring against the pale shock in her features. You're making this up, Uncle Peter blurted, his voice cracking. This is some kind of twisted joke. Without a word, I reached into the handbag they'd all sneered at earlier, low-key practical, and completely beneath their standards, and pulled out a folder. I brought documentation, I said, calmly opening the folder and laying out the pages on the table, right next to the untouched cranberry sauce. Here's the court-stamped bankruptcy filing. And these, I tapped a page with my manicured finger, show the debt acquisition agreements. All legitimate. All final. I flipped to another sheet. This one's my favorite. A list of creditors. Morgan Holdings controls 82% of what you owe. That's not possible, Diana whispered. You run a tiny website reselling second-hand clothes. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Is that really what you think I've been doing all this time? Their confused expressions were answer enough. While you were rolling your eyes at my online hobby, I was building Eclipse Luxury Group from the ground up. It's now valued at over $3.2 billion. And Morgan Holdings, my private investment firm, is worth even more. $3 billion. Laura sputtered, wine dribbling down her chin. Give or take, I said with a shrug. It's been a solid quarter. My father finally managed to speak, though his voice trembled with fury barely held in check. If this is all true, if you really control our debt, why? Why would you do this to your own family? I set my wine glass down with slow precision. You mean the family that demoted me to the mailroom after I earned my MBA? The one that mocked every strategy one proposed to modernize the company? The family that labeled me a failure at every holiday table? That family. Right on cue, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. Excuse me, I said, standing. That'll be my assistant. She's probably confirming the final paperwork. As I stepped into the hallway, their hushed voices followed behind me. She's bluffing. Check the accounts. Check the lawyers. She can't possibly. I smiled as I answered the call. Yes, Jennifer? All set, Miss Bennett, she replied crisply. Bankruptcy has been approved. Our asset acquisition package is ready for delivery. Should we move in? Give them 5 more minutes, I said. Let the news settle. When I returned to the dining room, they were gathered around Uncle Peter's phone, tapping frantically, scrolling through bank statements, legal bulletins, anything that could disprove what I just told them. I paused by my chair. Shall we talk next steps? Next steps? My father repeated, incredulous. My team will be arriving shortly with the acquisition offers, I said. My mother looked dazed. Team? She echoed. What team? The doorbell rang. I glanced at my watch. That would be them now. The legal and financial advisors, I explained, already walking to the foyer. I hope you don't mind if they join us for dessert. We have quite a lot to go over. My father stood abruptly, trying to reclaim some semblance of control. You can't just come in here and… I already have, I interrupted smoothly. Your company defaulted on $142 million in loans. Loans I now legally own. I fixed my gaze on him. So you have 2 choices, work with me on a structured sale and transition, or I liquidate everything first thing Monday morning. Diana broke down in tears, mascara streaming like ink across her cheeks. But what about the new facilities? The IPO plans? Never real, I said, cutting her off. You've been insolvent for months. Did none of you bother reading the financials? Or were you too busy planning promotions and cocktail parties while the ship was sinking? Jennifer stepped into the dining room with my team, 3 lawyers, 2 financial experts, each carrying briefcases filled with contracts and documentation. Their calm, polished presence clashed almost comically with my family's stunned silence. Miss Bennett, one of the attorneys greeted me. Shall we begin? I gestured to the table, where slices of pumpkin pie sat untouched. Help yourselves. My mother's pie is excellent. For the next 2 hours, we went line by line through the company's downfall and my terms for acquisition. I had spent months behind the scenes, quietly buying up the debt through shell firms and subsidiaries, watching the Bennett empire unravel thread by thread. This is thorough, Uncle Peter finally admitted, flipping through the pages with a grim expression. Unlike some, I replied with a thin smile. I actually understand corporate strategy. By the time we wrapped up, the family business that had once sneered at me had officially crumbled. And mine? Mine had never looked stronger. I had offered them generous terms, more generous than they deserved. But there was no ambiguity. The power dynamic had shifted, and I was now the one calling the shots. As my team gathered their materials and prepared to leave, I delivered the final blow. Diana, James, Laura, please have your offices cleared out by Monday. Your roles are being phased out as part of the restructuring. Diana's voice rose in a shrill burst. You're firing us? Your own family. I didn't flinch. No. I'm removing unqualified personnel who were appointed based on bloodlines instead of merit. But if it helps, I hear the local Walmart has openings. I stood, smoothing the wrinkles from my dress, the same one they'd mocked earlier for not being designer. Thanks for dinner, Mom. The turkey was excellent, even if none of us really got to enjoy it. Too much business on the table tonight. I had just reached the front door when my father's voice called after me. Was this all some kind of payback? I turned to face him. All of them. No, Dad. This was business. The payback? That's just a fringe benefit. Outside, as I walked toward my car, I could hear Diana sobbing, lamenting her mortgage, her club dues, the vacation she'd no longer afford. James was shouting threats about lawsuits, bluffing with empty hands. I slid into the driver's seat, not of the basic sedan they believed I still drove, but of a sleek, black S-Class Mercedes I'd had delivered for this exact evening. As I pulled away, I saw them all through the dining room window, standing there like ghosts at the scene of their own demise. My phone buzzed. A final message from Jennifer. Congratulations, Miss Bennett. The press release for the acquisition is scheduled for Monday morning. I smiled. Thanksgiving next year would be very different. Would they still call me the family disappointment when my name was on their paychecks, if they had any left? Would they still smirk at my so-called online hobby, now that they were out of jobs? I doubted it. 1 week later, Bennett Manufacturing ceased to exist. It was reborn as Eclipse Manufacturing, another proud addition to my corporate portfolio. I kept the original logo, the one my grandfather designed. But I added a subtle touch, a small eclipse emblem in the corner. A quiet, permanent symbol of how the family outcast had outshone them all. Diana ended up working retail, not Walmart, but close enough. James and Laura had to relocate, the collapse of the company staining their resumes. Uncle Peter took early retirement, his pride too damaged to continue. My father made one attempt to reconnect about a month after the deal closed. He left a voicemail. "It seems I misjudged you," he began. By the end, he was asking for a position. I had Jennifer send him our standard rejection email, the same one we send to every unqualified applicant. That Thanksgiving, I didn't attend the family gathering. I was overseeing operations across multiple businesses, including the one that had once been their crown jewel. Instead, I mailed each of them a card bearing the Eclipse Manufacturing logo. Inside, a handwritten note. "Grateful for the business lessons. Hope you're enjoying the real world. L." Sometimes, the sweetest success tastes like pumpkin pie. Sometimes, the family failure becomes the one they all fear. And sometimes, karma doesn't knock, it signs the check.